"I live here alone," said the little girl to the millionaire who had reached the top of a peak in the Rockies. "Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story, and I want to get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help." The biting wind of the Colorado Rockies whipped across Arthur Vance's face as he once again adjusted the climbing rope around his waist. At 52, his hands, calloused from his construction empire, trembled slightly, not from the cold that pierced his bones, but from the proximity of the dream he had nurtured for 5 years. The whispering peak rose before him like a sleeping giant, its slopes covered by a thick mist that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. "I'll make it today, Eleanor," he murmured to himself, instinctively touching the wedding ring he still wore, even after all this time. The memory of his deceased wife was his only company in that icy solitude of the mountains, and each step toward the summit represented a desperate attempt to get closer to her again. Arthur had started the climb 3 days earlier, setting out alone from Aspen with a determination that bordered on obsession. His construction company was thriving, his employees respected him, but none of that mattered when the nights came, and the silence of the empty house screamed Eleanor's absence. The mountain had become his escape, his refuge, the only place where he could still feel she was near. The sun was beginning to set when Arthur reached a particularly treacherous rocky ledge. His muscles ached, his fingers were numb with cold, but he knew he was close to his goal. That's when it happened. A piece of rock gave way under his right foot, and he found himself plummeting toward a ravine that opened up like a hungry mouth. Panic seized his chest as he realized he was in free fall. The safety rope had snapped with the impact, and death seemed certain. That's when a second rope appeared out of nowhere, swinging before his eyes like an unexpected salvation. Without hesitation, Arthur grabbed it tightly, feeling his shoulders protest against the sudden weight. When he finally managed to pull himself up to the edge of the ravine, he was shaking violently, not just from the shock, but from the impossibility of what had just happened. Who had thrown that rope? There were no other climbers in the area, he was sure of it. He looked around, searching for his savior, until his eyes fixed on a small, silent figure a few feet ahead. It was a child, a girl of no more than 4 years, with disheveled dark hair and dirty clothes, watched him with large dark eyes that seemed to carry a sadness too deep for her age. She was barefoot, despite the intense cold, and in her right hand she held a piece of rope identical to the one that had saved Arthur from the fall. "Are you hurt, mister?" the girl asked in a sweet voice, yet laden with a strange maturity. "I saw you fall and threw the rope I found here." Arthur was paralyzed for a few seconds, processing the surreal situation. "Child, what are you doing here alone? Where are your parents?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, a mix of concern and disbelief. "My name is Willow," she said, approaching without fear. "My mom, Clara, brought me here and said she'd be back, but it's been a long time. I live over there." She pointed in a direction where Arthur could vaguely distinguish what looked like a makeshift structure among the trees. Following the girl, Arthur discovered a crude cabin made of branches, tarps, and scraps of metal, clearly built by an amateur. Inside, there were scattered supplies: granola bars, cookies, water bottles, all obviously taken from hikers' backpacks. The child had turned this place into a makeshift home, using found sleeping bags as a bed and organizing her few belongings with the care of someone much older. "Willow, how long have you been here?" Arthur asked, his stomach churning at the thought of such a small child surviving alone in these hostile conditions. "I don't really know," she replied, shrugging. "It's been many moons. Mummy said she was going to get food in the city and would be back before the big rain, but the rain has come many times." Her words were spoken without self-pity, just a simple statement of her reality. Arthur looked around the makeshift cabin and felt a sharp pain in his chest. The situation was absurd and desperate. "Child, you can't stay here. It's too dangerous. I'm going to take you home with me and then we'll look for your mother." "Do you promise you'll help me find my mommy, Clara?" Willow asked, her eyes filling with a fragile hope that broke Arthur's heart. "I promise," he said, not yet knowing that this promise would lead him down a path of discovery that would change his life forever. When Willow lifted her arm to grab one of her few clothes, Arthur saw something that made his blood run cold. On the girl's left arm was a crescent-shaped scar, identical to the one his late wife Eleanor had in the exact same spot. The resemblance was so perfect, so impossible, that for a moment Arthur thought he was hallucinating from the exhaustion and altitude. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the impossible thoughts, but he couldn't take his eyes off the mark on the child's pale skin. It was as if the universe was playing a cruel trick on him, placing a physical reminder of Eleanor right before his eyes when he least expected it. "Let's get out of here," he said finally, his voice hoarser than he intended. "You shouldn't be alone in this place." The descent from the mountain with Willow proved more difficult than Arthur had imagined. The girl, despite her apparent fragility, showed surprising endurance, walking with steady steps on trails that would make experienced adults hesitate. During the journey, she spoke little, but when she did, her words carried a strange familiarity that left Arthur deeply disturbed. "The mister smells like the woman in my dreams," Willow said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the trail and looking at him with those large, penetrating eyes. "She smells like white flowers and old wood." Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. Eleanor always wore a specific jasmine perfume, and he still had the habit of using the same sandalwood soap she used to buy for him. How could a child living isolated on a mountain know this? "What woman in your dreams, Willow?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm as he helped the girl down a taller rock. "A beautiful woman who comes to visit me when I sleep. She has hair like ocean waves and always sings a sad but beautiful song. She told me that one day someone would come to get me, someone she loved very much." "Awaken." Willow spoke these words with the naturalness of someone describing breakfast, unaware of the devastating impact they had on Arthur. The businessman's legs almost gave out. Eleanor had wavy brown hair and always hummed a song she said was about meetings and farewells. A coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. But why was his heart beating so erratically? When they finally reached the base of the mountain, where Arthur had left his SUV, it was already dark. Willow fell asleep in the passenger seat before they even reached the main highway. And throughout the entire drive to Aspen, Arthur couldn't stop looking at her in the rear-view mirror, searching for other impossible similarities to his deceased wife. Arthur's house was in a quiet neighborhood of the city, a large, well-kept structure he had designed himself years ago. When he carried the sleeping Willow inside, the child murmured something that made his blood run completely cold. "What a pretty house, Mommy. Just like the one you showed me in my head." Arthur stopped in the middle of the living room, looking at the girl in his arms. Eleanor always said she dreamed of having children running through the house, playing on the wooden stairs he had made especially for her. How could Willow know about that? The next morning, Arthur woke to the sound of someone humming in the kitchen. For a moment, still half asleep, he thought it was Eleanor making coffee like she did every day before the accident. When he came downstairs and saw Willow sitting at the table, humming the exact same tune his wife used to sing in the shower, he felt as if the world was collapsing around him. "Good morning, mister," Willow said cheerfully, stopping her humming. "I found cookies in the cupboard. I hope you don't mind." "Where did you learn that song, child?" Arthur asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. "The woman in my dreams always sings it. She said it's her favorite song and that one day I would sing it for someone special too." Willow bit into the cookie, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil her words were causing. Arthur needed answers. He picked up the phone and called Dorothy Shaw, a social worker he had known for years through his charity work building affordable housing. "Dorothy, I need your help urgently. I found an abandoned child on the mountain and I need to locate her mother." "My God, Arthur, bring her here right away. We'll file a police report and start the search," Dorothy replied, her voice filled with professional concern. On the way to the social worker's office, Willow was glued to the car window, observing the city with curiosity. "Mommy Clara said cities were bad places, full of bad people, but it looks pretty here." "Did your mother talk a lot about cities?" Arthur asked, taking the opportunity to gather more information. "She didn't talk much about anything. She always seemed sad and scared. She said bad people were looking for us, but never explained who they were or why." Willow's voice grew quieter, as if she were sharing a dangerous secret. At Dorothy's office, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, Willow was cooperative, but her answers were always vague or impossible to verify. She didn't know her last name, couldn't remember any previous address, and her only clear memories were of life on the mountain with Clara. "I'm going to do a full search in the records, but I need more information," Dorothy said after an hour of trying to extract useful details from the girl. "Arthur, can you take care of her for a few days while we investigate?" "Of course," he replied, but inside he knew it wasn't just civic duty motivating him. There was something magnetic about Willow, an inexplicable connection he couldn't ignore. That afternoon, while Willow played in the backyard, Arthur went up to the attic to get some toys he had stored years ago, gifts he had bought for children he and Eleanor never had. When he came down with a rag doll, he found Willow standing in front of the photo shelf in the living room, staring intently at a picture of Eleanor. "That's her," Willow said simply, pointing to the photograph. "The woman from my dreams. Only here she's awake." Arthur dropped the doll. "How can you say that? You've never seen this woman before." "But I see her all the time. She tells me stories about you, about how happy you were in this house, about the plans you had." Willow turned to him with a disturbing seriousness. "She said you still cry for her every night." It was true. Arthur cried alone in his room, hugging the pillow that still held her scent. But how could a 4-year-old child know that? That night, he couldn't sleep. He watched Willow through the ajar door of the guest room, seeing her draw in a notebook he had given her. The next morning, when he went to check the drawings, he almost fainted. Page after page showed the same female figure, a woman with wavy hair, always smiling, always in situations Arthur recognized as his memories with Eleanor. One drawing showed the woman cooking, another showed her dancing in the living room, a third depicted her watering plants in the backyard. They were all places and activities that Eleanor did in exactly the same way. When Dorothy called late in the morning, her voice was tense. "Arthur, you need to come here urgently. I found something about this Clara that you need to know." In Dorothy's office, Arthur found the social worker with a grave expression. Surrounded by papers scattered on her desk and her computer open to several research tabs, the heavy silence of the room contrasted with the visible agitation in the woman's eyes. "Sit down, Arthur," she said, indicating the chair in front of her desk. "What I found out about Clara is disturbing." Arthur settled in, feeling his stomach contract. "What happened?" "Clara May Stevens. I found her record in the public health system." Dorothy turned the monitor so he could see the screen. "She passed away 2 years ago in a hospital in Denver, complications from pneumonia." The world seemed to stop around Arthur. "That's impossible. Willow said her mother left her on the mountain and promised to come back. If Clara has been dead for 2 years, then who was taking care of the girl? And more importantly, who is Willow really?" Dorothy crossed her arms, her expression a mix of professional concern and something close to fear. "Arthur, there's more. According to medical records, Clara never had children. She was sterile from a young age due to an illness. Arthur's hands began to tremble. Are you saying Willow might not be Clara's daughter? It's the only logical explanation, but then another question arises. Where did this child come from? Dorothy got up and began to pace. I'll have to report this to the authorities. It could be a case of kidnapping or child trafficking. No, Arthur said with more force than he intended. Not yet. Give me a few more days to investigate. Something isn't right with this whole story. When he returned home, Arthur found Willow in the backyard, playing with a doll she had improvised from twigs and leaves. The sight of the girl, so innocent and oblivious to the mysteries surrounding her existence, squeezed his heart even tighter. Willow, I need to ask you some questions about your mom, Clara, he said, sitting on the grass beside her. I can answer, she said without looking up from the doll, but she didn't like to talk much about the past. Do you remember how you got to the mountain? Willow stopped playing and became thoughtful for a long moment. I was very little. I only remember a long trip inside a car that made a lot of noise. Mommy Clara cried a lot and said we had to hide. Hide from what? I don't know. She talked about bad people who wanted to hurt me, but she never really explained. She just said we would be safe on the mountain. Willow's voice dropped. But she died and left me alone anyway. Arthur felt a pang in his chest. How do you know she died, child? Because she appeared to me in a dream and said goodbye. She was dressed in white and didn't seem sad anymore. She said I would be okay, that someone special would come for me. Willow looked directly at him. You are that special person. That night, unable to sleep due to the day's events, Arthur decided to review everything he knew about Eleanor and her death. He went up to the attic and opened the boxes he'd religiously kept for 5 years, searching for any detail he might have forgotten. That's when he found the folder with the accident documents. Leafing through the papers yellowed by time, his eyes fixed on a medical report he had never fully read at the time, being too devastated by the loss. Patient approximately 12 weeks pregnant, the document read. Multiple trauma resulted in the mother's death. Fetus surgically removed, but did not survive the injuries. Arthur let the paper fall from his trembling hands. Eleanor was pregnant when she died. He didn't even know they were going to be parents. Why had she never told him? And why had the doctors never mentioned it to him directly? He staggered downstairs, his mind working frantically to process this devastating information. He went to the room where Willow slept and watched her for long minutes. The age matched. If Eleanor's baby had survived, she would be exactly Willow's age now. But that was impossible. The medical report clearly stated the fetus had died. Doctors don't make mistakes like that. Or do they? The next morning, Arthur called Dr. August Miles, the doctor who had attended to Eleanor on the night of the accident. The man was retired but agreed to see him at his home for a chat. Dr. Miles, now in his 70s, received Arthur in his private study, a room filled with diplomas and photographs from a long and respected medical career. I remember your wife's case well, the doctor said, his voice carrying a genuine sadness. It was one of the most difficult losses of my career, a young woman full of life. Doctor, I need to know about the baby. The report says it didn't survive, but... Arthur hesitated, feeling foolish for asking the question. Is there any possibility there was a mistake? Dr. Miles was silent for a long moment, nervously fidgeting with a pen on his desk. Arthur, there are things about that night that haunt me to this day. Arthur's heart raced. What kind of things? The nurse in charge of the procedure was Sabrina Reed, a competent professional, but she was going through serious financial difficulties at the time. A few weeks after your wife's accident, she suddenly resigned and moved to another state. What does that have to do with my case? Doctor. Miles stood up and walked to the window. Arthur, I've always had a suspicion I could never prove. The official report states the baby didn't survive, but I was operating on another patient at the time of the emergency delivery. Sabrina was the one who performed the procedure. Are you implying she lied in the report? I'm saying that in the chaos of that night, with several injured people arriving at the hospital, there might have been irregularities, and that Sabrina disappeared shortly after with a considerable amount of money that no one knew where it came from. Arthur felt his legs weaken. Where can I find this nurse now? I don't know. She completely vanished. But if you really suspect something, maybe you should hire a private investigator. Leaving the doctor's office, Arthur was distraught. The coincidences were impossible to ignore. A child, the exact age his would have been, with a scar identical to Eleanor's, showing impossible knowledge about his life, found by him on the mountain. When he got home, he found Willow drawing again. This time, the drawing showed two female figures, one he immediately recognized as Eleanor, and another that seemed to represent a hospital nurse. Who are these women in your drawing, Willow? The beautiful woman from my dreams, and the mean woman who made her cry, she answered naturally. The beautiful woman told me the mean one took something very important from her, but that one day everything would be okay. Arthur had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Every word from Willow was like a puzzle piece, fitting perfectly into a terrible and impossible truth he was beginning to glimpse. He picked up the phone and called Bruce Stone, the most respected private investigator in the region. Bruce Stone was a 58-year-old man, an ex-cop who had opened his own investigation agency after 3 decades of dealing with the region's darkest cases. His reputation for efficiency and discretion had made him the first choice for clients who needed to unearth long-buried truths. When Arthur arrived at the modest office in downtown Aspen, he found Bruce examining documents behind a desk piled with papers and photographs. The man was tall and thin, with graying hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through people. Mr. Vance, I read about the case over the phone. I must admit it's one of the most unusual situations I've ever been asked to investigate, Bruce said, gesturing for Arthur to sit. A child who appears out of nowhere, knows intimate details about your deceased wife, and whose supposed mother died 2 years ago. It's almost like a horror movie. I know how absurd it sounds, Arthur replied, running his hands over his tired face, but I need answers. If there's the slightest possibility that this girl is your biological child who supposedly died in the accident, Bruce completed. I understand. I'll investigate this nurse, Sabrina Reed. If she really falsified medical reports, she must have left a trail. Meanwhile, at home, Willow was undergoing a transformation that disturbed Arthur even more. The girl, who was initially shy and reserved, had begun to display strange behavior, as if she were getting too comfortable in the house. She knew the location of rooms she had never visited, knew where Arthur kept his tools in the basement, and the day before had prepared a snack using ingredients that were stored in the back of the pantry, places a 4-year-old shouldn't be able to reach or even know existed. Willow, how did you know where I kept the honey cookies? Arthur asked during breakfast, watching the girl eat peacefully. The beautiful woman in my dreams showed me. She said you two always hid the sweet things in that cabinet to eat after dinner. Willow licked her sticky fingers. She also told me you're afraid to sleep alone, and that's why you leave the TV on every night. It was true. Since Eleanor's death, Arthur couldn't sleep in absolute silence and always fell asleep to the low sound of the television. But this was a habit he had developed alone, at home, away from any witnesses. That same day, something unexpected happened. Valerie Vance, Arthur's younger sister, showed up at the door unannounced. She was elegantly dressed in expensive clothes with impeccably styled hair, but her eyes carried a hardness Arthur recognized immediately. "Brother, we need to talk," Valerie said, entering the house without waiting for an invitation. At 47, she had built a successful career in New York City as a corporate lawyer, but had never lost her tendency to control the lives of everyone around her. "Valerie, I wasn't expecting you. I thought you were still angry with me," Arthur said, genuinely surprised. His sister had broken off relations with him 15 years ago after a terrible fight over their parents' inheritance. "I heard from the neighbors that you brought a strange child home. I came to see if you've gone completely insane." Valerie's eyes fixed on Willow, who had appeared in the living room holding her twig doll. "Who is this girl?" "It's a long story, Valerie. I found her abandoned on the mountain and—" "Of course you did," Valerie interrupted with sarcasm. "Arthur, you're suffering from pathological grief. You're seeing things that don't exist, creating fantasies to fill the void Eleanor left." Willow approached slowly and watched Valerie with a disturbing intensity. "You're the mean sister," the girl said suddenly, making Valerie take a step back. "The beautiful woman in my dreams told me about you. She said you hurt his heart very much." "What the hell is this child talking about?" Valerie asked, clearly uncomfortable. "Willow, go play in the backyard," Arthur said quickly, but the girl didn't move. "She told me about the big fight you had, about the money you took, about how he cried when you left," Willow continued, her childish voice contrasting with the surgical precision of her words. Valerie turned pale. "How can she know that? Did you tell her about our fight?" "I've never talked about that with anyone," Arthur replied, feeling a mix of shame and confusion. "Willow, go up to your room, please." After the girl left, Valerie turned to her brother with fury in her eyes. "Arthur, you need psychiatric help. You're projecting your memories onto this child, creating a sick fantasy where she has a connection to Eleanor. It's not a fantasy, Valerie. Things have happened that you wouldn't understand." "Oh, I'd understand. You're delusional, brother. And this girl is taking advantage of your vulnerability, making up stories to gain your sympathy." Valerie walked to the photo shelf. "Where did you really find her? In an orphanage on the street?" "On the mountain, exactly as I said." "Oh, right. And she was there alone, surviving like a feral child." Valerie's tone was loaded with disdain. "Arthur, children like that don't exist in real life. Someone was taking care of her. Someone taught her these things she knows about you." At that moment, a scream echoed from the upper floor. Arthur and Valerie ran up the stairs and found Willow in the master bedroom, standing in front of Eleanor's closet, holding a blue dress that had belonged to his late wife. "She asked me to wear this," Willow said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She said she misses wearing pretty clothes." Valerie looked at her brother with an expression that mixed pity and irritation. "You let this child go through Eleanor's clothes?" "I never said she could come in here," Arthur replied, genuinely confused. "The room is always locked." "Then how did she get in?" Valerie examined the lock. "Arthur, you're being manipulated by a very smart child. She probably found out where you hide the key and comes in here when you're not home." But Arthur knew that was impossible. The key to Eleanor's room was always with him, hanging on the same chain that held his wedding ring. He never took it off his neck, not even to sleep. That night, after Valerie left, promising to return the next day with a social worker to resolve the situation, Arthur watched Willow as she slept. The girl muttered incomprehensible things, turning restlessly in bed. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "She's angry," Willow said in a sleepy voice. "The beautiful woman is very angry with the mean sister. She said she's going to try to take me away from you." "No one is going to take you away, child," Arthur promised, but a part of him wondered if he had the right to make such a promise. "She told me a secret," Willow continued, sitting up in bed, "about the day she went away. She said she had a surprise for you, but she couldn't tell you in time." Arthur's heart stopped. What kind of surprise? A surprise that was growing inside her belly, a surprise she loved very much. and was very sad when it couldn't come into the world right. Arthur sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. How could a 4-year-old talk about pregnancy like that? How could she know about something that he himself had only found out a few days ago? Willow, tell me more about this surprise. The beautiful woman said the surprise didn't die like everyone thinks. She said someone lied, someone who wore white clothes in the place where she went away. Willow lay back down, but she also said the truth always comes out, even when it takes a long time. The next morning arrived full of tension as Valerie returned to the house accompanied by Dr. Regina Fields, a child psychologist she had hired from New York. The woman was stern, middle-aged, with thick-rimmed glasses and a briefcase full of documents she carried as if it were a weapon. "Mr. Vance, your sister told me about the unusual situation you're experiencing," Dr. Fields said, entering the living room with a professional air. "I need to assess the child's well-being and determine if this environment is suitable for her." Arthur's blood boiled. "Valerie, you had no right to do this without consulting me." "Yes, I did. You're clearly having a psychotic break and putting a child at risk," Valerie retorted, crossing her arms. "This girl needs professional care, not the fantasies of a man who talks to his dead wife." Willow appeared at the top of the stairs, observing the visitors with those large, penetrating eyes. She came down slowly, each step calculated, until she stopped in front of Dr. Fields. "You came to take me away," Willow said, not as a question but as a statement. "The beautiful woman warned me this would happen. Child, my name is Regina. I'm a psychologist, and I want to talk to you about how you're feeling here," the doctor said, trying to use a gentle tone that sounded forced. "I feel at home," Willow answered simply. "He protects me, just like the beautiful woman said he would." Dr. Fields exchanged a significant look with Valerie. "Willow, who is this beautiful woman you always talk about?" "She's his heart's mommy. She comes in my dreams and tells me stories about when they were happy." Willow approached Arthur and held his hand. "She said you would try to separate us, but the truth wouldn't let that happen." "See," Valerie whispered to the psychologist, "the child is reproducing his delusions." Dr. Fields asked to speak with Willow alone, taking her to the backyard while the siblings remained in the living room. The tension between them was palpable. "Arthur, you need to accept help," Valerie said, her voice a little softer. "I know you lost a lot when Eleanor died, but this obsession will destroy you." "It's not obsession. Things have happened that you couldn't explain in 100 years, he replied, walking to the window to watch Willow talking with the psychologist. "Then explain this to me. If this girl has some supernatural connection to Eleanor, why has she never mentioned the baby your wife lost in the accident?" Arthur turned abruptly. "How do you know about the baby?" Valerie smiled coldly. "I did my homework before I came here. I talked to Dr. Miles last night. He told me all about your visit, your suspicions about the nurse, and especially about the fetus that didn't survive." "So you know Eleanor was pregnant?" "I do. And I also know that you're desperate to believe this child is your miraculously resurrected son." Valerie approached her brother. "Arthur, listen to me carefully. Premature babies of 12 weeks do not survive trauma of that kind. It's impossible. You're clinging to a sick fantasy." From the backyard, fragments of the conversation between Dr. Fields and Willow could be heard. The psychologist asked standard questions about memories, family, feelings, but the girl's answers were always evasive or impossible to verify. "Willow, tell me about your life before you met Mr. Vance," the doctor said. "I lived with Mommy Clara on the mountain. She taught me not to trust people from the city, especially women who ask too many questions." Willow's response was accompanied by a direct gaze that made the psychologist uncomfortable. "And what about this woman from your dreams? When did you start dreaming about her?" "I've always dreamed, since I was little. She told me that one day I would find my real family." Willow began to draw in the dirt with a stick. "You don't believe me, do you? Just like the mean woman inside." Dr. Fields watched the drawing taking shape on the ground. It was a house, exactly like Arthur's house, with all the correct architectural details, including the side porch that was only visible from a certain angle. "How do you know how to draw this house in such detail?" the psychologist asked. "The beautiful woman showed me in my dreams. She said that one day I would live here, that it would be my real home." Willow continued drawing, adding human figures next to the house. "She also told me about the surprise that was growing in her belly when she went away." Dr. Fields quickly jotted it down on her clipboard. "What surprise, Willow?" "A little baby that was going to be loved very much, but a mean nurse lied and said it died when she actually gave it to someone else." Willow stopped drawing and looked directly at the psychologist. "Do you think babies can come back to their real families?" The question left Dr. Fields speechless. How did a 4-year-old know about these specific details? Arthur could have told her, but according to Valerie, he had only found out about Eleanor's pregnancy a few days ago. When they returned inside, Dr. Fields requested a private conversation with Valerie. Arthur stayed in the living room with Willow, who seemed quieter than usual. "Are you sad?" he asked, stroking the girl's hair. "The beautiful woman is angry. She doesn't like it when people try to separate us." Willow snuggled into the sofa next to him. "She told me that the mean sister made you suffer a lot when you were little." Arthur sighed. "Valerie and I had a difficult childhood. Our parents fought a lot, and she always blamed everyone for the family's problems." "Is that why she left and took the money that was also yours?" The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. 15 years ago, when their parents died, Valerie had taken control of the inheritance, taking advantage of the fact that he was devastated by the recent loss of Eleanor. She sold the family properties without consulting him and disappeared with the money, leaving only a note saying she needed to start a new life. "How do you know about that, Willow?" "The beautiful woman told me you cried a lot back then. You lost your wife, your parents, and your sister all at once. You were left all alone in the world." Willow's eyes filled with tears. "But now you're not alone anymore." From the study came raised voices. Valerie and Dr. Fields were arguing intensely, but Arthur couldn't make out the words. Finally, the two women came out. Dr. Fields' expression was one of confusion, while Valerie looked furious. "I need more time to assess the situation," the psychologist said, putting away her documents. "There are aspects of this case that are outside the normal parameters." "What do you mean?" Valerie asked, clearly dissatisfied. "The child is obviously being influenced by him." "The child demonstrates knowledge that is impossible to explain through external influence. Details about events that happened before she was born, information that not even Mr. Vance himself knew until recently." Dr. Fields adjusted her glasses. "I'm going to recommend a deeper investigation before making any decision about custody." Valerie exploded. "You've all gone mad. There's no supernatural explanation for this. The child is either lying or has been coached to say these things." "By whom?" Arthur asked. "She was alone on the mountain, Valerie. Who would have coached her?" At that moment, the phone rang. It was Bruce, the private investigator. "Arthur, you need to come to my office urgently. I found Sabrina Reed, and what she told me is going to change everything." Bruce's office was messier than ever when Arthur arrived. Photographs, documents, and notes covered every available surface, creating a chaotic mosaic of information that seemed to tell a disturbing story. "Sit down." "Arthur, what I've discovered will shake your beliefs about everything," Bruce said, gesturing to a chair in front of his desk. His eyes were red with fatigue, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Did you find Sabrina?" "I did. She's living in Kansas City under a false name, working as an elderly caregiver." Bruce picked up a thick folder. "But before I tell you what she said, you need to see this." The investigator spread several photographs on the table. They were images of medical documents, certificates, and hospital records dating back 5 years. Sabrina Reed wasn't just an ordinary nurse. She was part of a baby-selling ring that operated within the hospital. Children born to mothers in vulnerable situations were declared dead and sold to couples desperate for children. Arthur felt the world spin around him. "Are you saying my child was sold?" "Yes." Sabrina confessed everything when I confronted her. "Your baby was born alive, perfectly healthy, but was handed over to a woman named Clara May Stevens." Bruce paused, letting the information sink in. The same Clara who raised Willow on the mountain. Arthur's hands were shaking violently. "So Willow is really my daughter?" "It seems so." Sabrina gave me specific details. The baby had a birthmark on her left arm, in the shape of a crescent moon. According to her, Clara paid $50,000 for the child, money she used to disappear from the city. Arthur remembered Willow's scar, identical to the mark Eleanor had in the same spot. Now everything made sense, in a terrifying and wonderful way. But why did Clara run to the mountain with her? Bruce turned a page in the folder. Clara had a history of mental instability. She genuinely believed Willow was her biological daughter and developed an elaborate fantasy about it. When she found out she could be prosecuted for illegally buying a child, she panicked and fled to the most isolated place she could find. And when Clara died, Willow was left alone, surviving on the resources Clara had taught her, waiting for a mother who would never return. Bruce leaned back in his chair. "Arthur, your daughter spent 2 years completely alone on that mountain." The pain in Arthur's chest was physical. To imagine such a small child, his own daughter, surviving alone in such brutal conditions was almost unbearable. "I have more information," Bruce continued, noticing Arthur's emotional state. "Sabrina told me that Clara was obsessed with death. She told Willow detailed stories about Eleanor, about the two of you, about the life the baby was supposed to have had." "How did she know these things about our life?" "Sabrina provided personal information about you and Eleanor to Clara, address, habits, routines. It was part of the full service she offered to buyers, so they could invent convincing stories about the children's origins." Arthur felt nauseous. "Are you saying Clara knew everything about us?" "She did. And she spent years telling this information to Willow as if they were memories of a past life, of a true mother she had lost." Bruce picked up more documents. Clara had mystical tendencies. She believed in reincarnation. She convinced Willow that Eleanor was her heart's mother who communicated with her through dreams. The revelation was devastating. Everything Arthur had interpreted as a supernatural connection was the result of a perverse psychological conditioning. Willow didn't have supernatural memories. She had been programmed by a mentally unstable woman. "Arthur, there's something else you need to know," Bruce said, his voice growing graver. "Sabrina told me she wasn't the only child sold. For 5 years, she diverted dozens of babies. Many families believe they lost children when in fact they are alive somewhere. Why did she decide to confess now? Terminal cancer. She has a few months to live and wants to make peace with God." Bruce closed the folder. "She's willing to testify officially, to hand over all the records she kept over the years." When Arthur returned home, he found Valerie and Dr. Fields still there. Talking intensely in the living room, Willow was sitting on the floor, drawing with crayons. "Where were you?" Valerie asked, noticing her brother's distraught expression. "Discovering the truth," Arthur replied, feeling the crushing weight of everything he had just learned. "Willow is my biological daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Valerie looked at him as if he had completely lost his mind. "Arthur, that's impossible. The baby died in the accident." "It didn't die. It was sold by a corrupt nurse to a woman who fled to the mountains. Arthur knelt beside Willow. Isn't that right, my dear? Willow stopped drawing and looked at him with those big, sad eyes. Did you find out the truth about the mean woman in the white clothes? I did, and I found out that you are really my daughter. To everyone's surprise, Willow showed no joy or surprise. Instead, her tears began to flow silently. I always knew, she said quietly. Mommy Clara told me every night that you were my real daddy, but that bad people wouldn't let you meet me. Dr. Fields approached, fascinated. Willow, how do you feel knowing that Arthur is your father? Sad, the girl replied unexpectedly, because it means Mommy Clara lied about a lot of other things too, and it means the beautiful woman in my dreams wasn't real. It was just a story she made up. The pain in Willow's voice was palpable. She was discovering, at 4 years old, that her entire reality had been built on lies and manipulation. Valerie sat heavily in an armchair. Even if this is true, Arthur, you can't just assume paternity. There are legal procedures, DNA tests, investigations by Child Protective Services. I know. I'll do whatever it takes. Arthur hugged Willow, who snuggled against him. But she is my daughter. I can feel it here, he said, tapping his chest. And when the tests confirm it, Valerie said, her voice filled with a strange emotion, what will happen to our family? It was a question loaded with implications. For 15 years, Valerie had avoided all contact with her brother. Now, suddenly, she discovered she had a 4-year-old niece who had grown up in brutal conditions. Our family will finally be complete, Arthur replied, looking directly at his sister, if you want to be a part of it. That night, after the visitors left, Arthur told Willow the whole truth about her origin, adapting the details for her age. The girl listened in silence, processing information that completely redefined her understanding of herself. Daddy, she said finally, using the word for the first time. Was Mommy Clara a bad person? No, my dear, she was a sick person who did a wrong thing, but who loved you in her own way. And the beautiful woman in my dreams never existed. Arthur's heart broke. Eleanor, your real mother, existed and loved you even before you were born. The stories Clara told about her were true, even if she told them in a confusing way. Willow thought for a long moment. So my real mommy loved me, but she could never meet me because of the mean woman in the white clothes. Exactly. And now I've finally found my real family. Now you're home, Arthur promised, kissing the forehead of the daughter he had lost and found again in the most impossible way imaginable. The days following the revelation of the truth became a whirlwind of legal procedures that consumed all of Arthur's emotional energy. The DNA test was collected on a cloudy morning, with Willow showing a disturbing maturity during the process, as if she were already used to being subjected to exams and evaluations. It won't hurt, will it, Daddy? She asked, as the nurse approached with the swab to collect saliva from her mouth. It won't hurt at all, my dear, Arthur replied, holding her small hand. It's just to officially prove we're family. While they waited for the results, which would take a week, Valerie began to exhibit strange behavior. She had extended her stay in Aspen, claiming problems with her office in New York. But Arthur suspected there was something deeper going on. Valerie, why don't you go back to New York? He asked during dinner, watching his sister push food around her plate without really eating. I need to make sure you can handle this situation, she replied, avoiding eye contact. It's a huge responsibility to raise a child who has been through so much trauma. Willow, who was playing on the living room floor, looked up. Aunt Valerie is sad, she said suddenly, just like Mommy Clara used to be when she remembered bad things. What bad things, dear? Arthur asked, intrigued. Things about babies she could never have. Mommy Clara cried a lot when she talked about empty bellies. Willow went back to her drawings. Aunt Valerie has the same sadness in her eyes. Valerie turned visibly pale and abruptly stood up from the table. "I need some fresh air," she murmured, going out to the backyard. Arthur followed her, finding his sister sitting on the wooden bench he had built years ago for Eleanor. Valerie was crying silently, something he hadn't seen her do since childhood. "Valerie, what's going on? You've been different since you got here." "You don't understand, Arthur," she said between sobs. "All these years in New York, I built a career, made money, bought an apartment, a car, everything I thought would make me happy. And it didn't. It made me feel empty, completely empty." Valerie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I tried to have children for years. I did treatments, spent fortunes on fertilization, went through painful procedures. Nothing worked." Arthur felt a pang of guilt. During all these years of anger and resentment, he had never considered that his sister might also be suffering. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I was ashamed of having stolen your inheritance, of having abandoned you when you needed family the most, of having built a life based on selfishness." Valerie looked at the house, where Willow could be seen through the window. "And now you find your daughter in the most impossible way. And I realize I wasted 15 years that I could have spent being a present aunt. It's not too late," Arthur said, sitting next to his sister. "Willow needs all the family she can get. She hates me. I can see it in her eyes. She knows I was cruel to you. Willow doesn't hate anyone. She was raised with so much distorted love that she only knows forgiveness." Arthur touched his sister's arm. "Valerie, the money you took, I forgave that years ago, but I couldn't forgive myself." At that moment, Willow appeared at the back door, holding a drawing she had just made. She approached Valerie shyly. "I made this for you, Auntie," she said, holding out the paper. It was a drawing of 3 figures holding hands, clearly representing Arthur, Valerie, and herself. "Mommy Clara taught me that broken families can be healed with patience." Valerie looked at the drawing with tears in her eyes. "Willow, can you forgive me for being mean to your daddy?" "I already have," the girl replied simply. "People do bad things when their hearts are in pain, but now you can get better, Auntie, just like I'm getting better." At the end of the week, the DNA results arrived by email. Arthur was at work when he received the message, and his hands trembled so much he could barely hold the phone. The test confirmed with 99.9% certainty that Willow was his biological daughter. When he arrived home with the official news, he found a scene that surprised him. Valerie was in the backyard, teaching Willow how to plant flowers, the two of them laughing at something the girl had said. "Daddy!" Willow shouted when she saw him, running into his arms with her hands dirty with soil. "Aunt Valerie taught me how to make a garden. We're going to plant flowers for Mommy Eleanor. The results are in," Arthur announced, showing the phone. "It's official. You are my daughter." Willow smiled, but didn't show the explosive joy he expected. Instead, she snuggled into his arms with a contented sigh. "I already knew. I always knew in here," she said, touching her chest. "But now the other adults know too, right?" Valerie approached, still holding a pot with seedlings. "Arthur, I talked to my lawyer in New York today. I'm transferring my firm to Aspen." "What do you mean?" "I want to come home. I want to help raise my niece, if you'll let me." Valerie looked at Willow, who was watching the conversation with interest. "I want to make up for all these lost years. Are you sure? Your life is in New York. My life was empty in New York. Here I have a chance to have a real family." Valerie knelt down to Willow's height. "What do you think, little one? Would you like to have an aunt living nearby?" "I'd like that very much," Willow replied, hugging Valerie spontaneously. "Then you can teach me more about gardening and how to take care of flowers." That night, after Willow fell asleep, the siblings talked late into the night about the future. Valerie had decided to sell her apartment in New York and buy a house nearby so she could be actively involved in raising her niece. "Arthur, I need to tell you something about the inheritance money," she said, fidgeting nervously with her hands. "Valerie, that's in the past." "No, it's not. I kept it all. Every cent that was yours. I invested and made it grow over these 15 years. She took an envelope from her purse. "It's all here, the original amount, plus the returns. It's over $500,000 now." Arthur looked at the envelope without taking it. "I don't want this money, but it's rightfully yours. Then use it for Willow, her education, health, her future. Consider it your investment in being a present aunt." Valerie smiled through her tears. "You were always a better person than me." "No, Valerie. I just went through experiences that taught me that family is the only thing that really matters." 2 weeks later, with all the legal paperwork resolved, Arthur officially registered Willow as his daughter. The girl chose to keep her first name, but proudly adopted the Vance surname. On the way back from the county clerk's office, she asked a question that caught Arthur off guard. "Daddy, now that I'm your real daughter on paper, can I stop pretending I remember Mommy Eleanor?" "What do you mean, my dear? I never really remembered her. It was just stories Mommy Clara told. But I thought you'd be sad if I said I didn't know her." Willow looked out the car window. "Can I get to know Mommy Eleanor the real way now? Through you?" Arthur pulled the car over, too emotional to keep driving. His daughter had spent weeks protecting his feelings, faking memories she didn't have, just so she wouldn't hurt him. "Willow, you never have to pretend anything with me. We'll discover who Eleanor was together, through photos, real stories, real memories. And can I make new memories too? With you and with Aunt Valerie?" "We're going to make thousands of new memories," Arthur promised, hugging the daughter he had found again after an impossible journey through pain, lies, and finally, truth. 3 months had passed since Willow officially became Willow Vance, and the adjustment to family life was far from the fairy tale Arthur had imagined. The girl suffered from constant nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night screaming for Clara and refusing to be comforted by anyone. "Daddy, she's calling for me again," Willow said one early morning, entering Arthur's room with her eyes red from crying. "Mommy Clara is angry because I forgot her." Arthur picked her up, his heart breaking. "My dear, they're just dreams. Clara isn't angry with you." "Yes, she is. She saved me when everyone abandoned me, and now I have a new family, and I don't think about her anymore." Willow's tears soaked Arthur's pajamas. "Am I a bad person for being happy without her?" It was an impossible question to answer. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that loving her new family didn't mean betraying the memory of the person who raised her, even if that person had committed terrible crimes? Dr. Frank Andrews, the child psychologist Valerie had hired, explained that Willow was going through a complex process of grief and guilt. The girl felt responsible for Clara's death and guilty for finding happiness away from her. It's common for children who have been through kidnapping or captivity situations to develop emotional bonds with their captors, Dr. Andrews explained during a session. Willow genuinely loved Clara, despite everything. Now she needs to process that this love wasn't wrong, even if the situation was. Valerie, who now lived in a rented house 3 blocks away, had become a constant presence in her niece's life. She picked Willow up from school every afternoon and spent hours helping her with homework and games. But even this relationship was fraught with complications. "Aunt Valerie," Willow said one afternoon while painting at the kitchen table, "why did you stay away from Daddy for so long if you love each other?" The direct question caught Valerie off guard. "Sometimes adults make bad choices when they're hurt, little one. Like Mommy Clara did when she took me away from my real parents?" "Something like that, yes." Willow stopped painting and looked directly at her aunt. "Do you regret it like she regretted it?" "I regret it every day." "Then why don't you apologize to him like I do when I do something wrong?" The brutal simplicity of the question left Valerie speechless. How do you explain to a child that adult pride is sometimes stronger than regret? That night, Valerie sought out Arthur for a conversation she had been putting off for months. Arthur, I need to officially ask for your forgiveness. Not just about the money, but about abandoning you when you needed family the most. Valerie, we've already talked about this. No, we haven't. You forgave me, but I never really apologized. Valerie sat down in the living room, her hands trembling slightly. When our parents died, I was so afraid of being alone in the world that I ran away. I thought if I cut all ties with the past, including you, I could start over without pain. And did you? I only managed to multiply the pain for 15 years. Valerie looked out the window, where Willow was playing in the backyard, even in the dark. That girl is 4 years old and shows more emotional courage than I have in my entire adult life. It was true. Willow was facing devastating traumas with a resilience that impressed all the professionals who worked with her. She attended therapy twice a week, participated in family sessions with determination, and was slowly learning to separate real memories from implanted ones. But her progress took an unexpected setback when Dorothy, the social worker, brought disturbing news about the investigation into the baby-selling scheme. Arthur, we found other families who were victims of Sabrina Reed, Dorothy said during a visit to the house. At least 12 children were sold illegally over 5 years. And those children, have they been found? Some have, some haven't. But there's a specific situation that might affect Willow. Dorothy hesitated before continuing. One of the children sold was a twin. The sister remained with the biological parents, who never knew they had lost another baby. Arthur's stomach churned. Are you saying Willow might have a twin sister? It's possible. Sabrina confessed that in some cases she separated twins, selling only one and declaring the other had died. We'll need to investigate Willow's birth records to be sure. When they told Willow about the possibility of having a sister, the girl's reaction was unexpected. I always knew someone was missing, she said calmly. Sometimes when I played alone on the mountain, I felt like someone should have been playing with me. How did you know that, my dear? Arthur asked. I can't explain it. It's like when you feel you've forgotten something important, but you can't remember what it is. Willow continued drawing. Mommy Clara sometimes talked about the other half that was left behind. Did she know you were a twin? I think she knew a lot of things she didn't tell me. The investigation of hospital records revealed the devastating truth. Willow did indeed have a twin sister who had remained with a substitute family, believing she was an only child. The sister's name was Isabel, and she lived with a loving family in Boulder, just 2 hours away. How are we going to handle this? Valerie asked during a family meeting with Dr. Andrews. Very carefully, the psychologist replied. Both Willow and Isabel have built identities based on being only children. Discovering they have a twin sister could be traumatic for both. But they have the right to know each other, Arthur argued. They do, but it needs to be done gradually, with psychological support for both families. When they told Willow they had found her twin sister, she was silent for long minutes, processing the information. Does she look like me? She finally asked. A lot, Dorothy replied, showing a photo that Isabel's family had sent. You're practically identical. Willow studied the photograph intently. She looks happy. She is happy. She has a family that loves her very much, just like you do. What if she doesn't want to meet me? What if I mess up her happiness? The question broke Arthur's heart. At 4 years old, his daughter was worried about being a burden to a sister she didn't even know. Willow, you could never mess up someone's life. You only bring joy wherever you go. But I brought sadness to Mommy Clara. That's why she died, sad and alone. Dr. Andrews intervened. Willow, Clara didn't die because of you. She died because she was sick, and her illness had nothing to do with you. But if I hadn't existed, she wouldn't have done bad things to have me." It was a reasoning too complex for such a young child, but it showed how Willow carried guilt she shouldn't have to bear. The discovery of the twin sister had reopened wounds that were just beginning to heal. That night, Willow had the worst nightmare in months. She woke up screaming that there were two Claras dead because of her, and that now Isabel would also die if she met her. "Daddy, I can't meet my sister," she said between sobs. "The people who love me always get sad and go away." Arthur hugged his daughter, feeling the crushing weight of all the traumas she carried. The journey to heal Willow would be much longer and more complicated than anyone had imagined. Willow's refusal to meet her twin sister created an emotional stalemate that consumed the entire family. For 2 weeks, the girl flatly refused to talk about Isabel, and whenever someone mentioned the subject, she would run and lock herself in her room. Dr. Andrews suggested a different approach. Instead of forcing a meeting between the sisters, he proposed that Isabel be told about Willow's existence first to see how she would react to the discovery. "Isabel's family has the right to know the truth," he explained during a session with Arthur and Valerie. "And maybe her reaction will help Willow understand that she is not a threat to the people she loves." The conversation with Isabel's adoptive parents, Maria and Charles Foster, took place on a Saturday afternoon at Dorothy's office. The couple arrived visibly nervous, not knowing exactly why they had been called for an urgent meeting about issues related to their daughter's adoption. Maria was a 42-year-old music teacher with brown hair and kind eyes that filled with tears when she learned the truth. Charles, a 45-year-old engineer, remained silent for long minutes after Dorothy finished explaining the entire situation. "Isabel has a twin sister?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. "All this time, we thought she was an only child. How did she take the news?" Charles asked, clearly trying to process the implications. "We haven't told her yet," Dorothy replied. "We wanted your opinion on how to proceed." Maria and Charles looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. "We need to tell Isabel," Maria said finally. "She has always asked if she had siblings, always said she felt like someone was missing in her life." "And would you be willing to allow a meeting between them?" Arthur asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "Of course," Charles replied without hesitation. "Isabel is our daughter, but that doesn't change the fact that she has a sister who deserves to know her." When they told Isabel about Willow, the girl's reaction was the exact opposite of her twin sister's. She was ecstatic with the discovery, immediately asking to meet the sister she always knew existed somewhere. "Mommy, when can I see her?" Isabel asked, jumping with excitement in the Foster family's living room. "Does she look like me? Does she like the same things I do? Where has she been all this time?" Maria recorded a video of Isabel talking about her feelings to show Willow. In the video, the girl held a drawing she had made of 2 girls playing together. "Hi, little sister," Isabel said in the video, waving at the camera. "My name is Isabel, and I'm so happy to know you exist. I always felt that someone special was missing from my life, and now I know it was you." Odi, when they showed the video to Willow, she watched in absolute silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She seems happy," Willow murmured when the video ended. "She is very happy," Valerie confirmed. "Happy to know she has a sister. But she doesn't know about the bad things that happened to me. She doesn't know that I brought sadness to Mommy Clara." "Willow," Dr. Andrews said, sitting beside her, "do you want to record a video for Isabel? You can tell her exactly how you feel." Willow thought for a long time before agreeing. The video she recorded was devastatingly honest. "Hi, Isabel. I'm your sister Willow," she said, looking directly at the camera. "I'm happy you exist, but I'm also scared. I don't want bad things to happen to you because of me. The woman who raised me got very sad and went away forever, and I don't want that to happen to your parents either. When Isabel saw the response video, her reaction surprised even her parents. "Can I say something to my sister?" she asked, asking to record another video. "Willow," Isabel said in the second video, her voice firm despite her 4 years of age, "you don't bring sadness to people. You bring joy. I know this because ever since I knew you existed, I've been the happiest girl in the world. My parents were happy too, not sad. You don't hurt anyone, little sister." The impact of Isabel's words on Willow was visible. For the first time in weeks, she smiled genuinely. "She's really not sad that I exist?" Willow asked. "No, my dear, she's radiant," Arthur replied. Gradually, through an exchange of videos and drawings, the two sisters began to get to know each other from a distance. Isabel sent photos of her favorite toys, her room, her parents. Willow reciprocated with drawings and small objects she considered special. It was during this exchange that Isabel made a discovery that would change everything. "Mommy," she said one morning, holding a simple necklace she had worn since she was a baby, "this necklace has always been mine, right?" "Yes, dear. Why?" Maria replied. "In the drawing Willow sent, she's wearing a necklace just like mine." Maria looked at the drawing more closely. Indeed, Willow had drawn herself wearing a necklace identical to the one Isabel had always owned. When they investigated the origin of the necklaces, they discovered that Sabrina had given one to each twin when she separated them, a way to maintain a symbolic connection between them. Clara had kept Willow's necklace for years, and it was one of the few possessions the girl had brought from the mountain. "This means we were always connected," Willow said when she learned about the necklaces. "Even when we didn't know about each other, something linked us." The discovery of the necklaces finally convinced Willow to agree to meet Isabel in person. The first meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning in Aspen's Central Park, a neutral territory where both would feel comfortable. When Willow saw Isabel for the first time, running towards her across the park, the reaction was immediate and visceral. The two girls hugged as if they were two parts of a whole that were finally reuniting. "You look just like me!" Isabel exclaimed, laughing and crying at the same time. "You too!" Willow replied, touching her sister's face as if to confirm she was real. Maria and Charles watched emotionally, along with Arthur and Valerie, as the girls talked non-stop, as if they had a lifetime of conversations to catch up on. "Willow," Isabel said after some time, "do you want to come to my house and see my room? And I want to see yours too." "Can I, Daddy?" Willow asked, looking at Arthur with eyes shining with genuine happiness. "Of course you can, my dear." While the children played, the adults talked about how to proceed from there. Maria and Charles were open to regular visits, joint vacations, and any arrangement that would allow the sisters to maintain constant contact. "Isabel has always been a happy child," Maria said to Arthur. "But since she found out about Willow, it's like a missing piece has finally fallen into place." "That's exactly how I feel about Willow too," Arthur replied, "like she was the missing piece in my life." That night, Willow slept peacefully for the first time in months, without nightmares, without screams. When Arthur went to check on her, he found her smiling in her sleep, hugging the drawing Isabel had made of the two of them together. For the first time since he had found her on the mountain, Arthur felt that his daughter was truly beginning to heal the deepest wounds of her fragmented soul. 6 months after the twin sisters' first meeting, a new routine had been established between the two families. Willow and Isabel visited each other on alternating weekends, and the differences in their personalities, shaped by such distinct experiences, created a fascinating dynamic. Isabel was extroverted, confident, and curious about everything around her. She had grown up in a stable and loving environment, which was reflected in her optimistic and spontaneous nature. Willow, on the other hand, retained traits of caution and introspection that years of trauma had etched into her personality. Willow always thinks a lot before doing anything. Maria observed during a conversation with Arthur, Isabel just acts on impulse. It's interesting how the environment has shaped two genetically identical children in such different ways. But these differences, instead of creating conflict, seem to complement the two girls perfectly. Isabel helped Willow be more courageous and spontaneous, while Willow taught Isabel to be more reflective and careful. It was during one of these visits that something happened that would change the course of the story again. The two families were gathered at Arthur's house for a Sunday lunch when the phone rang. It was Sabrina Reed. "Mr. Vance, I need to speak with you urgently. It's about the girls," said the weak voice of the ex-nurse, who was in a terminal state at a hospital in Kansas City. "What happened, Sabrina? There's something I never told you about their case, something I only discovered recently through my old records." Her voice was filled with urgency. "Can you come here today? I don't have much time." Arthur looked around the table where both families were having a cheerful lunch. Willow and Isabel were drawing together, their heads bent over the paper in perfect sync. "Is it important?" he asked. "It's about the girl's biological mother, the real story of Eleanor." Arthur's heart stopped. "What do you mean, the real story?" "I can't talk over the phone. Come here, please. Bring Isabel's parents, too. You need to know this before I—" The call was abruptly cut off. Arthur stood there holding the phone, a sense of foreboding growing in his chest. "Arthur, what is it?" Valerie asked, noticing his disturbed expression. "It was Sabrina. She wants to see us urgently. She says there's something about Eleanor she never told us." Maria and Charles agreed to accompany him to Kansas City, leaving the girls in Valerie's care. The 2-hour flight was tense and silent, each lost in speculation about what new revelation awaited them. The hospital where Sabrina was admitted smelled of disinfectant and death. They found her in an ICU bed, connected to several machines, her skeletal appearance contrasting with the urgency in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said with difficulty. "I know I don't deserve it, after everything I've done, but you need to know the truth." "What truth?" Arthur asked, sitting beside the bed. "Eleanor wasn't who you thought she was." Sabrina coughed violently before continuing. "Her name wasn't Eleanor Santos. It was Eleanor Silva, and she had a medical history that I hid from you." "What kind of history?" "She suffered from a rare genetic condition called Williams syndrome, a disease that causes heart and neurological problems, but also—" Sabrina paused, gathering her strength. "That can also cause fertility difficulties and high-risk pregnancies." Arthur felt the world spin. "Are you saying Eleanor was sick?" "She was, and she knew it. The doctors had told her she probably wouldn't be able to get pregnant, and if she did, both she and the baby would be at risk." "Why did she never tell me?" "Because she loved you too much to take away your chance of being a father. When she found out she was pregnant against all odds, she was terrified, but also desperate to give you the child you always wanted." Charles spoke for the first time. "Does this have anything to do with the girls?" "It does. Williams syndrome is hereditary. There's a 50% chance that each of the twins has inherited the condition." The silence that followed was sepulchral. Maria covered her mouth with her hands, while Arthur felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Were they tested when they were born?" Maria asked. "No. In the chaos of the accident and with everything that happened afterward, the genetic tests were never done." Sabrina turned to Arthur with pleading eyes. "That's why I called. You need to have them tested. If one or both have the syndrome, they will need specialized medical follow-up." "How was this not detected before?" Charles asked. "The syndrome can be asymptomatic in childhood, especially in mild cases, but as the children grow, they can develop heart problems, learning difficulties, social issues. Sabrina tried to sit up better in bed. Eleanor only developed the most severe symptoms in her teens. Arthur was stunned. So the accident was caused by a sudden cardiac arrhythmia while she was driving. Williams syndrome can cause that. She didn't lose control of the car by accident. It was her heart that failed. The revelation changed everything. Eleanor hadn't died in a random accident, but due to a condition she knew she had and had chosen to hide to protect Arthur from worry. She knew she could die at any moment, Sabrina continued, and she chose to live each day as if it were her last, loving you with all possible intensity. On the flight back, Arthur was devastated by the discovery. Eleanor had spent her entire pregnancy knowing she was risking her own life, but had chosen to give him the happiness of being a father. "We need to get the girls genetically tested immediately," Maria said, breaking the silence in the car. "What if one of them has the syndrome?" Charles asked. "Then we'll face it together," Arthur replied, "as a family." When they got home, they found Willow and Isabel sleeping, wrapped in a hug on the living room sofa, while Valerie watched television. They both looked so healthy, so normal, that it was impossible to imagine a genetic disease could be hidden in their small bodies. "How will we tell them?" Maria whispered. "Carefully," Arthur replied, and with a lot of love. That night, after Isabel went home with her parents, Arthur talked with Dr. Andrews about how to approach the situation with Willow. "She's been through so much trauma," he said. "How can I tell her that she might have a hereditary disease from the mother she never knew?" "Willow is stronger than you think," the psychologist replied. "And she has a solid support network now. Whatever the test results are, you will face it together." 3 days later, Willow and Isabel had their genetic tests done. The wait for the results would be 2 weeks. 2 weeks that would test the strength of the entire newly formed family. "Daddy," Willow said on the night after the test, "if I have the same disease as Mommy Eleanor, am I going to die young like her?" The direct question from his 4-year-old daughter cut Arthur's heart. "No, my dear. Medicine is much better today, and we will take very good care of you. What if Isabel has it and I don't? Then we will take very good care of her too. Promise you won't let anything bad happen to her. I promise we will do everything possible to protect you both." But Arthur knew he was making a promise he might not be able to keep, and that uncertainty tormented him as they waited for the results that could change everything again. The 2 weeks of waiting for the genetic test results became the most agonizing period both families had ever faced. Each day seemed to drag on forever, laden with a silent tension that affected even the children. Despite the adults' efforts to maintain normality, Willow, with her sensitivity sharpened by past traumas, clearly sensed that something was wrong. She stopped playing with the same spontaneity, started having restless nights again, and asked questions that revealed her constant worry. "Daddy, why does everyone get quiet when I enter the room?" she asked one morning at breakfast. "Did they do something wrong with the tests?" "They didn't do anything wrong, my dear. Adults just get worried sometimes, but it has nothing to do with you," Arthur replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is it because I might get sick like Mommy Eleanor did?" The direct question caught Arthur off guard. For days, he and Valerie had discussed how to approach the subject, but Willow, as always, went straight to the point with brutal honesty. "Willow, there's a small chance you might have inherited a condition from your biological mother. But even if you have, doctors know how to take care of it nowadays." "And Isabel? Could she have it too?" "She could. You both took the test." Willow was silent for a long moment, distractedly stirring her cereal. "If I have the disease and Isabel doesn't, will she stop liking me?" Arthur's heart broke. Even facing the possibility of a serious condition, Willow was worried about how it would affect her relationship with her sister. "Willow, look at me," he said, crouching down to her level. "No matter what happens, Isabel will always love you, just like I and Aunt Valerie will always love you. Nothing can change that. Even if I get really sick and have to go to the hospital like Mommy Eleanor. Even then, family doesn't abandon family no matter what." That afternoon, when Isabel came for her regular visit, the conversation between the sisters was closely observed by the adults. It was fascinating how the two children processed the situation in different ways. "Willow, are you worried about the tests?" Isabel asked directly, with her characteristic lack of preamble. "I am. Are you?" "A little. But my mom said that even if we have the disease, we'll still be sisters and we'll take care of each other." "Wouldn't you rather have a sister who wasn't sick?" Isabel stopped playing and looked at Willow with a seriousness unusual for her 4 years. "Willow, I don't want just any sister, I want you. Sick or not sick, you're my real sister." The simplicity and honesty of Isabel's declaration brought tears to the eyes of all the adults present. Maria held Charles's hand, while Valerie discreetly stepped away to compose herself. On the 10th day of waiting, something unexpected happened. Dr. Andrews called Arthur urgently. "You need to bring Willow here today. It's not about the genetic tests, it's something different," the psychologist said, his voice filled with concern. "What happened?" "Willow called my office last night. She got the number from the planner you left here at the last session. She said she needed to talk to me about something very important that she couldn't tell you." Arthur's stomach churned. What did she talk about? "Come here and we'll talk. But Arthur, prepare yourself. She's carrying a weight you can't even imagine." When they arrived at the office, Willow went directly to Dr. Andrews as if it were a long-scheduled meeting. "Dr. Andrews, can you tell my daddy what I said yesterday?" she asked, sitting in the armchair with a disturbing maturity. "Willow told me something she has been keeping for months," the psychologist began, looking alternately at father and daughter. "She told me that Mommy Clara didn't die of a common illness." Arthur straightened in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Tell him yourself, Willow," Dr. Andrews encouraged. "Mommy Clara killed herself," Willow said with devastating calmness. "She took too many pills on purpose because she couldn't bear the sadness of having stolen me from my real parents anymore." The revelation hit Arthur like a lightning bolt. "How do you know that, my dear?" "Because she told me before she did it. She said she would leave a lot of food for me and that I should stay hidden on the mountain until someone found me. She said she was a very bad person for taking me from my family and that she didn't deserve to live." Dr. Andrews intervened. "Willow told me she kept this secret because she was afraid you would be angry with her for not stopping Clara. Willow, you were 4 years old when that happened. There was no way you could have stopped anything," Arthur said, pulling his daughter into a hug. "But I could have told someone she was very sad. I could have asked for help. Who would you tell, my dear? You were alone on the mountain. I could have. I could have." Willow began to cry for the first time since she started telling the story. "I could have loved her harder so she wouldn't go away." Arthur's heart shattered completely. His 4-year-old daughter had single-handedly carried the guilt for the suicide of the woman who raised her, believing she could have prevented the tragedy with more love. "Willow, listen to me carefully," he said, holding his daughter's face between his hands. "Clara was very, very sick in her mind. Her sadness was so big that not even all the love in the world could have cured it. You are not to blame for what happened, but if I hadn't existed, she wouldn't have stolen a baby and wouldn't have been sad. If you hadn't existed, I would never have known the purest love of my life," Arthur replied, his voice choked with emotion. "Clara made a wrong choice when she took you, but you, my dear, you are the best thing that has ever happened in my life." During the session, Dr. Andrews helped Willow process the guilt she had carried for so long. It was an immense burden for such a small child, which was finally being shared with people who could help her carry it. When they left the office, Arthur felt as if he knew his daughter from a new perspective. Her courage in carrying this terrible secret alone, in protecting the adults she loved from more pain, demonstrated a strength of character that impressed him and broke his heart at the same time. "Daddy," Willow said in the car, "now that you know everything about Mommy Clara, do you still love me the same?" "I love you even more," he replied without hesitation, "because now I know how brave you are and what a giant heart you have. And when the test results come, we'll face it together, whatever happens." That night, Valerie came for dinner, and for the first time they told her about Willow's revelation. Her aunt's reaction was to hug her niece and weep openly. "My little warrior," she whispered, "you've been through so much suffering alone." "But I'm not alone anymore," Willow replied. "Now I have a whole family to help me carry the heavy things." The next day, the call everyone had been waiting for finally came. Dr. Henry Clark, the geneticist in charge of the tests, asked both families to come to the hospital to receive the results in person. "Is that good or bad?" Charles asked over the phone. "Come at 2 in the afternoon. We'll discuss everything then," the doctor replied, giving no hints about the results. For the first time in weeks, Arthur felt ready for whatever news they would receive. After learning the full truth about the traumas Willow had faced alone, he was convinced there was nothing his family couldn't face together. Dr. Henry Clark's office at the university hospital was too quiet when both families gathered that Thursday afternoon. Arthur, Valerie, Maria, Charles, Willow, and Isabel sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle before the geneticist's desk, each dealing with anxiety in their own way. Willow held Isabel's hand tightly while her sister nervously swung her legs. The adults maintained controlled expressions, but it was impossible to completely hide the tension that permeated the room. Dr. Clark, a man in his 60s with grey hair and a presence that inspired confidence, opened 2 folders in front of him. His eyes moved between the 2 girls before settling on the parents. "Before I begin, I want you to know that regardless of the results, there are effective treatments and medical follow-up that allow people with Williams syndrome to live full and happy lives," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Doctor, can you just tell us?" Maria asked, her anxiety showing in her voice. Dr. Clark nodded. "Isabel Foster does not have Williams syndrome. Her genetic tests came back completely normal." The visible relief from Maria and Charles was immediate. Maria covered her face with her hands, while Charles hugged his daughter, who didn't fully understand what was happening but smiled to see her parents happy. "And Willow?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Clark paused for a moment, looking directly at the girl who watched everything with those big, intelligent eyes. "Willow, you have inherited a mild form of Williams syndrome from your biological mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Arthur felt as if the world had stopped around him, but he forced himself to maintain his composure for his daughter. "What does that mean, exactly?" Valerie asked, being the first to recover from the initial shock. "It means Willow will need regular cardiac follow-up, monitoring of cognitive development, and some special care throughout her life. But, and this is very important," Dr. Clark leaned forward, "the form she presents is significantly milder than what her mother had." "Doctor," Willow said suddenly, surprising all the adults, "does this mean I'm going to die young, like Mommy Eleanor?" The direct question from a 4-year-old about her own mortality left everyone momentarily speechless. Dr. Clark knelt down to her level. "Willow, with today's medical care, people with your condition can live long and normal lives. You'll need to take some medicine, have regular checkups, and be a little more careful with some activities. But you can have a happy and healthy life." "And can I keep playing with Isabel?" "Of course you can. You'll grow up together just as you've always dreamed." Isabel, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, turned to her sister. "Willow, this doesn't change anything between us. You're still my twin sister, and we'll take care of each other forever." For the next hour, Dr. Clark explained in detail the treatment plan for Willow: preventive medication for heart problems, regular consultations with specialists, psychopedagogical support for possible learning difficulties, and a series of periodic exams. "The good news," said the doctor, "is that we detected it early. Eleanor developed complications because her condition wasn't diagnosed until it was too late. Willow has all the advantages of modern medicine on her side." When they left the hospital, Willow was strangely calm. During the drive home, she made an observation that deeply touched all the adults. "You know, Daddy, now I understand why Mommy Eleanor visited me in the dreams that Mommy Clara made up." "What do you mean, my dear?" "She wanted to make sure that when I found out about her disease, I would know that she loved me even without knowing me." Willow looked out the car window, "and that she wouldn't let anything bad happen to me, even from far away." Arthur had to pull the car over because his tears were blurring his vision. His daughter's perspective on the situation, her ability to find meaning and comfort even in the face of a serious medical condition, impressed him beyond words. In the following weeks, a new routine was established. Willow began taking daily medication, saw a pediatric cardiologist monthly, and had occupational therapy twice a week. But surprisingly, these changes seemed to give her a sense of control over her own life that she had never had before. "I like taking the medicine," she told Dr. Andrews during a session, "because now I know I'm doing something to be well instead of just hoping nothing bad happens." The relationship between the sisters grew even stronger after the diagnosis. Isabel became Willow's care partner, reminding her of her medications, accompanying her to medical appointments whenever possible, and fiercely defending her when other children asked intrusive questions about her condition. Valerie, who had officially moved to Aspen and opened a law office in the city, became an informal expert on Williams syndrome, researching treatments, connecting with support groups, and ensuring Willow had access to the best possible care. "She has become my mission," Valerie told Arthur one night after they had put the girls to bed. "Spending years away from this family was the biggest mistake of my life. Now I have a chance to make up for it by taking care of Willow." "And you don't have to make up for anything, Valerie. Your presence in her life is already a gift. It's not just presence, it's purpose. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like I'm doing something that really matters." 6 months after the diagnosis, on a sunny Saturday morning, the two families gathered for a small celebration in the backyard of Arthur's house. It was the first anniversary of the day Willow and Isabel met, and both girls had planned a sisters' party with the help of the adults. "Daddy," Willow said as he set up a picnic table in the garden, "can I make a speech at the party?" "Of course, my dear. About what?" "About how sometimes bad things happen so that very good things can happen later." During the small party, Willow did indeed give her speech, with Isabel by her side for moral support. With her clear and determined voice, she spoke about the journey that had brought her there. "When I was little and lived on the mountain with Mommy Clara, I didn't know I had a whole family looking for me. I went through very sad things, but now I understand that those sad things brought me here." She paused, looking at each person present: Arthur, Valerie, Maria, Charles, Isabel, Dr. Andrews, and even Dorothy, who had been invited to the celebration. "Now I know I have a daddy who loves me more than anything, an aunt who takes care of me as if I were her own daughter, a twin sister who is my best friend, and other parents who treat me like family too. And even though I have a disease like Mommy Eleanor, I'm not afraid, because I know I'm not alone." When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Isabel hugged her tightly, whispering something in her sister's ear that made them laugh together. Later, when the guests had left and the girls were playing in the yard, Arthur went up to the attic to get the box of Eleanor's memories that he hadn't opened in months. At the bottom of the box, he found a letter she had written to him before their wedding, but that he had never fully read. "My love," the letter said, "if something happens to me, I want you to know that it was not in vain. Every moment we lived, every dream we shared, every plan we made, all of it created an energy of love that will never disappear. And if we have children, that energy will live in them, protecting them even when we can't be physically present." Arthur folded the letter carefully and went downstairs. He found Willow and Isabel asleep in a hug on the living room sofa, exhausted after the day's party. Watching the two girls, he finally understood completely what Eleanor had tried to say. The love he and Eleanor had shared had truly become a protective force that guided Willow through all her traumas until she came home. And now, surrounded by a family that loved her unconditionally, she was finally free to be simply a happy child, regardless of the challenges life might still bring. On the porch, watching the stars over Aspen, Arthur whispered a prayer of gratitude for finding his daughter, for regaining his sister, for discovering that family is much more than blood or genetics. It is choice. It is love. It is the determination to never give up on each other, no matter how difficult the journey may be. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.